I'm Mike Adams, and I want to welcome you to the third in a series of 5 half-hour programs devoted to the restoration and collection of antique radios. Today, you'll meet some collectors of 1930s through early 1940s big cabinet radios like this one. Bruce Westaby will show us how he restores the cabinets of these radios, and I'll take you to Pacific Pioneer Broadcasters for a behind-the-scenes look at the golden age of radio.
Secretary of State Charles Evans Hughes defended the Harding administration course on the League of Nations today when asked whether it wasn't time for the Republican Party to give the people an unequivocal statement in regard to its position on the world court.
Early radio could hardly be called broadcasting. First, as a curiosity, then as a two-way communications tool, radio finally made its way into the home in the 1920s. In this half hour, meet some of the creative people that were a part of the golden age of radio broadcasting.
Tell me, Mr. Moody, what are your feelings about the radio?
I don't hold with furniture that talks.
Well, you have a radio.
No, I had one in the hen house.
Yeah?
One day, all the hen's nests would be empty.
Uh-huh.
Next day, every nest would have 2 eggs into it.
You mean?
The hens was listening to Double or Nothing.
Yeah.
That period of radio, like from the mid-30s to the mid-50s, was a very important part of American history, and it mustn't be forgotten. So we have tried to save all the memorabilia. We have thousands and thousands of transcriptions and tapes of early radio shows, and our members, we have over 800 people who have been at least 20 years, most of us more like 40 and 50 years in the business. And we've tried to gather all these things up so they won't be destroyed.
Gotta hurry and pack. We'll travel light. It's the thing to do these days.
Where are the suitcases?
Right here in the hall of us.
Here's Fibber McGee. Now, Jim Jordan is the chairman of our board. You know he was Fibber McGee. He followed Edgar Bergen, who was our first chairman of the board, and Charlie McCarthy went along with him. I was in Chicago in the golden days. I was there from 37 to 40. I was on Against the Storm, and I was an understudy for Ma Perkins. I would have left town if Virginia had ever gotten sick, because I knew I couldn't sustain that beautiful performance that Virginia Payne did on Ma Perkins. I was on Bachelor's Children and Midstream and countless shows, Lights Out. And then I went to New York and I worked on Against the Storm and many others.
Well, Doctor, maybe you found out what's wrong with my husband. Maybe you can tell me about him. All those other doctors.
Gertrude, that's swell. I liked your entry line. It was flat and it's good characterization. Now, I want to get 2 emotions in this last speech of yours. And also on the other line in that little sentence there, make sure that I have the feeling that you are concerned about your husband's health.
I was an actor during the golden days of radio. I think the 30s and 40s, those were the years when radio was the best. In those days, people listened to programs. They tuned in at certain times as families or as individuals, mostly as families. So radio was our companion. It was important to us. I was asked to produce a little sample radio show, and in it we had to use some of the techniques, the dramatic techniques and the physical techniques that radio drama called for, very good radio drama. Let's look at this little drama, which we called simply Sam, which is the name of the main character.
Things are a lot different now, I guess. Now that Lillian and me are, well, sort of engaged. But it was awful important when it was happening. You know, like a lot of things that happen. And it wasn't so long ago either. I was still working part-time for old Craig in the Craig drugstore. It was after closing hours in the store on Saturday evening. Lillian, Craig's daughter, left an hour or so before, after helping me clean up. I was just locking the front door when I heard the register up front. Hey! Hey, what are you doing with that box? Get out.
I thought that...
Lillian!
I thought the store was closed, Sam. I didn't see any light.
in the writing. And we used a narrator in this radio show to tell the story, sort of fix it, and then to hear his thoughts.
It was the sort of thing you just don't expect from a girl. I didn't know what to say or do. It was her father's store, of course, but, well, old Craig wasn't the kind of guy to let Lillian out after 9 o'clock, much less let her take any money out of the till. I didn't know what to do. She was crying awful.
Please, Sam, please don't let Father know about it.
Oh, gee, Lillian, I'm not going to tell him. After all, nothing's been taken or anything.
That's just it, Sam. I've got to have $7. I just got to. I lost the money for the class dance. Father won't be until Monday, Sam. I'll have it back by then, I promise. I just got to have it, Sam. I just got to.
We could accentuate a dramatic section with a musical stinger or a bridge.
I didn't know what to do or say, but she was all kind of breathless and sobbing and pretty. I guess I'd been stuck on her for a long time. After all, it partly was her money, wasn't it? She was right about her father not coming down till Monday, and, well, that was the first part of it. It all would have been all right, too, if old Craig hadn't left his cane in the store that weekend, because the next day, Sunday...
Amen. And keep the words of the Almighty close to your hearts, my brethren.
Stop nudging me, Leland. What do you want?
You'll have to walk home alone after services, Penny.
Why?
I've got to drop by the store, Penny. I left my stick there last night.
Mind you, hurry home or you'll get a cold lunch.
As you would have them do unto you is a cardinal rule for all of us. Amen.
Sam!
Yes, Father?
Your father wants you to stop wearing tracks on the floor.
Exactly. Why don't you sit down and read, Sam? Haven't you any homework?
I finished it, Father.
Now, who can that be?
I'll get it.
I could see who it was through the window, and my stomach kind of bounced a little. He was awful mad. His face was that flushed color. I went into the kitchen too scared to face him, I guess, but I could hear what he was saying to Father through the door.
Your son is a thief, Mr. Johnson.
That's quite an accusation, Mr. Craig.
Anyone with your anarchistic ideas, Johnson, ought to keep his son under...
He was pretty wild. Father was calm, but then he started getting mad. After Craig left, Father called me into the living room. I thought to myself, I gotta keep her out of this, I gotta. There was only one thing to say to Father. I did it, that's all, I did it. There wasn't any use trying to keep up the lie any longer. I guess I kind of broke down and told him all about it. All about how she was crying and how she was class treasurer and how she needed the...
$7, eh, son? What kind of coins was the class treasury in?
Oh, it was mostly quarters and dimes.
Do you suppose, son, if Lillian got that money back, she'd have the courage to face her father?
Oh, sure she would, Pa. It's just that she got real scared.
Never mind, son. Martha, hand me your pin money jar.
Okay, that's the last capacitor I've replaced in the Sears Model 41. These are some of the old capacitors that I took out. These are old paper capacitors. They only last about 25 years, and then the sometimes the wax comes out of the end, or the dielectric, the insulation between the two connectors shorts out, and you get a bad capacitor. A capacitor is supposed to block DC voltage and allow AC voltage to pass through. AC is the signal path, and the DC is the high voltage. And when these break down, you get no radio. So what I've essentially accomplished in this Silvertone radio is to replace all of these old paper capacitors with these modern ceramic types, and these will easily last another 25 or 30 years.
You can often estimate the age of a radio by looking at the tubes. From the late 20s through the middle 30s, tube bases had 4, 5, or 6 pins. In the middle 30s, tubes with 8 pins and a plastic center key appeared, some with metal covers over the glass. And from World War II into the 50s, a smaller tube with 7 or 9 pins in a glass base slowly replaced the larger sizes.
The main thing is in buying a set is that if this little escutcheon here is missing, or the face and back of that's broken with the numbers and stuff like that, 9 times out of 10 you have to scrap another set to make that one complete, unless you get real lucky and find just a chassis somewhere with a face on. And that's getting harder and harder to do because there's more and more people becoming interested in it, and they're buying anything and everything, and so it gets to the point where you have to horse trade a little bit here and there. And
yeah. Well, one thing I was looking for when we were going through the thrift shops, and I still look for, is a radio that has most of the cosmetic features there, such as the dial and the escutcheon plate. Knobs I know I can get, grill cloth I know I can do, but as far as the actual dial, that's something when it lights up, that yellowed plastic over the years, there's nothing you can do to reproduce that.
No.
In my opinion, I've never seen anything that looks quite like an original dial.
No, once that's broken or gone, it's real difficult.
Well, okay, this is beautiful, and what I want to do is come back in a couple of weeks, and should I bring the radio with me, and we'll put it back together and try it out, and we'll make that our final stop here, and that'll be the end of our series.
Engineer was the only one that had anything to do with the show as far as engineering is concerned. And we would set up the orchestra, and the studio, of course, would be through the control room window, and work with the director. The director would usually sit right to the left of the engineer, and he would have a talkback microphone similar to the microphone that we have here. And then there would be an assistant director, usually from the network. If it was a network show, the assistant director would be over there, and then a script girl down on the end. So there would be about 4 people in the control room. This is the 44BX, which was the standard of the broadcast business all through the golden days of radio. Here's the inside of a ribbon microphone. If you'll notice, the ribbon here is suspended between 2 pull pieces. These are horseshoe magnets, and the ribbon is suspended in here, and a voltage is developed as it vibrates. As I move my hand, just the air pressure moves the ribbon.
The first radio microphone was made from telephone parts. It was replaced in the mid-20s by several versions of carbon button and the more rugged dynamic types. And along with the ribbon mic in the studio, the condenser mic with its built-in 3-tube amplifier was used for live music. Some radio programs were recorded on large discs called electrical transcriptions, but most were done live, sometimes with hilarious results.
There were a couple of us playing leads, and we were at the microphone, and I was the heavy, the villain. And I had to say something like, okay, you dirty so-and-so, take that. And then a shot was supposed to ring out. Well, I did the line, take that, nothing. And I looked over at the sound effects man, Advance, and he just went like this. Something happened, I guess, to the record. He had a sound effects record. And so I was a quick thinker, you know, at the microphone, and I turned around, and the other actor was Jack Wilson. And I said to Jack, well, you must have jammed my gun. You got to it early. You know, that was a line I ad-libbed. Director was, you know, in the booth just going hog wild and making all kinds of crazy faces. And I said, well, you must have jammed my gun. I said, well, I got it fixed now. Take that. Again, nothing. This time, Vance held up the head of the phonograph arm. It had come off. He was holding it up, and he was very gleeful. We're talking about a live show, you understand. We were on the air. It wasn't a network show, it was a local show. And here I was having to do something, and I thought very quickly again. I said, okay. I said, I'll kick you to death. That's the story. And the director, of course, was convulsed. And Jack, the other actor, Jack Wilson, dropped his script. It went all over the floor. I don't know how we finished it. Somehow we got through it.
The years 1930 to 1950 were the true heyday of radio entertainment because of the technology that allowed people to have radios in every home and then radios in every room of the home. The radio was the first truly phenomenally new piece of furniture, and people really that wanted first-class furniture would pay $3,000, for instance, for a Zenith Chinese model radio in the days when a new automobile cost $400.
Am I a fool without a mind?
Nice radio. This is a 1936 Grunow teledial made by General Household Utilities in Chicago. The idea of this radio was that you could dial it like a telephone. Your favorite station, for example, say you wanted KECA, which is now KABC. Put your finger in here and you mechanically move this until it stops at 79 and it locks right into the station.
Here's a 29 Zenith. It's really a pretty set. It's got the tuner inside there, the speaker inside there, and inside here is push buttons, and these are the first push buttons because they're mechanical, and when you push them down it runs the tuner around. Very, very primitive, but the set is mint and it doesn't play, but it soon will with no problems. But finding something that's in good original condition is getting harder and harder. That's where fellow collectors come in, and that's where different leads as to who might have an estate sale or who's been collecting stuff over the years that may part with something. This is a 36AK, which is one of the last sets they built because they went out of business in 36. And this flops down like so, and inside is it's got its clock, and these little cords pull out like so, and they plug in for your different times. And what that does is that the set will come on by itself, motor tune to the station you want, play that program for your hour, and then go to another station, and it'll do that as many times as there is chords, and then shut off by itself.
Hi. We have a few here. I didn't buy these. My brother bought these. I don't particularly... They're old consoles, but the only thing... Open the door on the... No, put it on the floor. Open the door on the console there. The reason I don't buy consoles is because they take up too much room. Maybe somewhere along the way I will go into it. But he bought a few consoles. I don't particularly like them only because of space. They take up so much space. It just happens someone came around and asked me if I was interested in old radios. The first time around, I said no. Then the more I thought of it, the more I realized I'm in the Hollywood area, which to me would be more of the radio beginning. And for that reason, I thought it might not have been a bad idea. So the next time the fellow came around, I told him, yes, I was definitely interested in old radios. My intention is someday to actually have a small museum of radios. Well, and well-informed, each one well-marked, the vintage, the year, the manufacturer, the model, and all that. I will have that eventually. That is my ultimate goal.
Frankie Lane, one of his big hits. Just go with the thing where Midas is the okay for all of our numbers. When
This is is a mid-30s radio, a McMurdo Silver. This is a really expensive radio. This is a radio that cost maybe $1,000 back during a time when cars didn't even cost that much. This radio has chrome chassis, 24 tubes, one of the nicest radios you could buy during the Depression, incidentally.
Even through the Depression, there were people who either still had wealth or wanted to give the appearance of wealth. It was a little bit of the conspicuous consumption phenomenon in that people who really wanted good furniture were willing to take their relatively limited funds during the Depression even and sock it into an elegant radio set. The radio set had become the first new true piece of living room furniture in 500 years, I suppose.
This is a 37 GE, the one we had on the bench, and this whole cabinet was apart. The top was off, this piece was out, the sides were out. I bought it from a friend of mine. I bought it reasonable, and the reason is because these sides along here were all split out, and along the edge they were all split out. And this is a real nice Crosley. This is all burl across here. And this cabinet is a cheaper cabinet where it's not screwed together. It's nailed and glued. And so a lot of the Majestics are that way, and a lot of the Crosleys are that way, and then some of the cheaper sets like that Grinnell. And when you try to get them apart, they break. In other words, you get in there with a butter knife or a wood chisel and you try to pop them apart, it splits. So a lot of times, out of necessity, these have to stay together. I can take a top off, you know, to help sanding and stuff like that. But sometimes when I get done with a set like this, it may be not as clean as some of the other things, but, you know, because you have a hard time getting all the little sanding particles and other particles out of the little cracks and stuff. I scrap a lot of sets, and I take the veneer off the sets. Generally, to get the veneer off, soak it in like a big cookie tin for one day, and it'll generally peel right off with the help of a putty scraper. Then that way you can really get some really nice looking veneers. This is black walnut, and this is a quilted walnut. And this is a Crosley table model here. Now the set is basically a really good design as far as the cabinet goes, but the only good wood in the whole cabinet is this piece of quilted walnut right here. All the rest of it is just orange crate wood. I mean, it's just a ply. Okay, well, as far as gluing on like the main joints and stuff like that, I use this alphatic resin glue. It seems to do pretty well. But on veneering, I use this liquid high glue, which is real close, or the original stuff that they used originally. And like I had to put in a piece around here on this. This is a 39 Philco. This is about the midsection out of it. This is hard to do without, on a curve like this, without ending up with lots of little pieces. But when you use the high glue, in between the joints you can see is just a little tiny black line. Where if you use the alphatic resin glue, if it doesn't butt just perfect, it'll leave a white line when the set is done. Well, to do a set right, it has to be pulled apart and everything taken care of as far as the speaker grills and any splits that are in it. Otherwise, later on down the line, somebody will move it and it's going to come apart, you know, or not look good, you know. And the woods are generally too pretty to let go with just a crummy finish on them, you know.
So now the top broke out of the nose of the ship, and the passenger top is lining the window looking down. It burst into flames.
Wait, get it started. It's crashing, and it's crashing terrible.
I am elected President of the United States.
As I looked at this Scott radio, and this is really the way this radio was kept with the beautiful chrome covers for the tubes, that was a very high-class radio. But I think of how important radio was to the nation, particularly during World War II, when news was so vital to us, and it bound the nation together.
And that's the news picture as it looks in post-war Europe tonight. Confused enough to be sure, but certainly not altogether hopeless. Good night.
With confidence in our armed forces, with the unbounding determination of our people, we will gain the inevitable triumph, so help us God.
I think that radio can be credited for, as I say, binding the nation together to make everyone determined to win World War II. And we would listen so carefully to Edward R. Murrow coming from This Is London, as he would come on and describe the bombings over there before we got into it. And then we would listen every night to all of our various newscasters, and it was extremely important. And the comedy shows, like our dear Fibber McGee's program, it gave us cheer, and it made us happy to have something to laugh at, because they were very sad times in World War II. But radio was there, and it kept us together.
Well, from Hollywood, we tried to give you some nice historical insights into radio programming the way it used to be, because after all, if you're a radio collector or you like to restore old radios, it's nice to know the type of radio programming that one would listen to on an old radio. Next week on this program, we're going to spend our time with Jack Dempsey, the old radio collector, a man who has a retail store in Hermosa Beach, and we'll tell you where you can find a radio, and we'll visit a couple of swap meets too and maybe buy some old radios. So come back next week. This has been Mike Adams. Thank you.
That whistle is your signal for the Signal Oil program, The Whistler.
And you'll want to watch Radio Collector in 2 weeks as we go to the 10th anniversary convention of SPURDVAC, the Society for the Preservation and Encouragement of Radio Drama, Variety, and Comedy.
I am the Whistler.
And years before that first radio drama, The Amateur Radio Operator. First organized in 1909, hams contributed to radio's invention and provided communication that saved lives in emergencies. Don Wallace has been on the air since 1912, and Gary Legal has been building transmitters since the 1930s.